Some of you may have never come across structuralist filmmaking. Some of you perhaps have. When I first discovered this kind of filmmaking, I was looking for experimental films. And these films are certainly that. They're experimental milestones in film's history. These films aren't talked about enough, as it's our view that they play a very significant part in pushing filmmaking in the right direction. We will make sure we explain what these films are and what they mean in context of film history. We will also make sure to explain how we can take this film movement and apply it to grow our revolutionary film theory. So what is structuralism? Well, to keep it basic, structuralist filmmaking focuses on very specific parts of filmmaking. What I mean by this is it tends to focus on the parts that make the film. For instance, a structuralist film will be about one component, let's say color, and it will only explore the subject by displaying color. Same thing for something like panning the camera or zooming on a shot. If the film is about camera pans, we will see a film entirely posed of camera pans. Their philosophy revolves around the exploration of film components separate from each other. They never try to blend everything together, because that's not how they view filmmaking should be. Each film should be an exploration of just one component of filmmaking. We can put this in context to where exactly these filmmakers came from, which is New York City in the 1950s and 60s. During this period, the art scene saw a change from the pop movement after World War II into the minimalist movement. Artists began to make pieces that didn't include great detail. For example, a sculpture would be just a single shape or a combination of simple shapes. Paintings would be singular colors and very formal and organized patterns. Minimalism wasn't creative, and many people find it, along with other modern art, to be poor quality. Minimalism doesn't really give the artist a template to express themselves deeply, along with communicating with the audience on an intimate level. In our opinion, structuralism isn't bankrupt like minimalism. It shares some of the same ideas, but the composition of these films are more often interesting visually than the minimalist pieces I've just shown you. Structuralism was a small, almost underground film movement in the 60s, but we think it serves a significance. That significance is the fact that they were able to separate from theater and literature. This means they were able to tell a story without the use of actors, sets, costumes, and so on. Now, if you're not familiar with our channel, we view that filmmaking needs to be separate from theater and literature in order to progress artistically. We will explore our view on this subject later in the video. Let's take a look at some of the popular structuralist filmmakers. We are going to cover 4 of them. Let's start with Michael Snow. Snow's most popular film is called Wavelength. It's a film that zooms on a picture that lasts for 45 minutes. It contains a few actors as someone dies in the room and people investigate it, but the film has no plot and virtually is just about the zoom. People often make fun of this film because it can simply be sped up and people argue it's the same experience. Either way, this film is an example of structuralism and its tendencies of just exploring one aspect of film. He has another film called Back and Forth. That is a film that pans, as the title suggests, back and forth, in a classroom full of kids. That is the film. No plot. No key subjects nor progression in the story. He also has another film called So Is This, which explores captions and the speed of how they can influence the audience's interpretation of the words. Snow also made sculptural artworks that were based on minimalist theory of creation. His films never reached a mainstream audience, and he was not successful in influencing future filmmakers, unlike another structuralist named Stan Brakhage. Brakhage's popular films consist of an aggressive style of painting on the physical celluloid of film. His films are basically moving paintings in a black void. I really enjoy his films. They are short expressions that you can experience very quickly. They aren't super deep and you can't analyze them, but they're interesting experiences. He wasn't too popular in terms of being mainstream, but he had an influence on the art scene in New York and universities. Eventually he influenced filmmakers like David Lynch and David Fincher, along with art house animators like Don Hertzfeldt. His style of visual expression, with the use of paint against the black celluloid, made a lot of filmmakers drawn to this technique. They thought it expressed a sense of dread and darkness in his films. He has other experimental films that could serve as experimental documentaries. He filmed one of his child's births, as well as an autopsy performed by doctors in a hospital. These films have actions that can be followed, but like his other films, there isn't really a narrative that can be followed. Another filmmaker from this movement is Hollis Frampton. In my opinion, his films are the most experimental and scientific in the group. All of his films have very simple concepts, yet he explores them in depth with the repetitive use of the same techniques. His films Zorn Lemma explores the rules and structure of language by showing the letters of the alphabet slowly being replaced by images. This structure doesn't change throughout the entire film. You essentially see the same thing in different variations over the course of an hour. At that length, it can certainly become boring. Another one of his films is called Lemon, which is a clever display of how lighting can be used on a stationary object. It's a simple short film that doesn't have too much to offer in terms of a wide use of techniques, but introduces variations of interesting conversations about lighting. Another one of his repetitive films is called Artificial Light, which is a short minute sequence shown 24 times, and each time it is shown with a different visual technique. All of his films explore techniques in a very peculiar way, and he does it without any actors. In my opinion, he's an interesting filmmaker, even though his films can't be held for too deep of a conversation. His ability to be creative with film is inspirational to young filmmakers looking to experiment. I remember when I first saw his films, I was very interested in how he was able to accomplish a vision without a plot or characters. The last of these filmmakers is arguably not even a structuralist, but I'm including him in this video because he was friends with all these guys and was a big supporter of them. Jonas Mekas is an amateur documentary filmmaker. A lot of his films are recorded by himself and are presented in a very personal manner. He's arguably the creator of the diary film, personal displays of events that happen to an individual capturing the images. However, what makes him an experimental filmmaker is his films are comprised and structured around moments rather than building a narrative. He's an impressionist, taking moments in life that he captures and displaying them with other moments he finds significant. Since his films are recorded on handheld camera, they can be seen as very innocent and kind-hearted. His films can be presented from some sort of humanist perspective, as he rarely has a strong political or social message that's meant to push the audience in a serious external direction. Rather, I think he's one of the filmmakers that wants you to look into yourself. Each one of these filmmakers wanted to make something that was outside of Hollywood, and they succeeded. They became the stars of the underground art house scene in the 1960s. Their films reflect a burning desire for people to be creative and generally encourage people to film things outside of the theatrical world. However, they did not reach a wide audience. Still to this day, even the most serious film buffs may not know of them. And this isn't to say they are hard to find. Some basic research can take you to them. I think it's because they haven't influenced a wide range of filmmakers, and people ultimately connected with these films on a personal level. This leads me into the next point of the video, which is our views on structuralism and its flaws as a movement. Now, I think the reason this movement never took off is because it could never connect to an audience. Why is this? I think it boils down to one thing: the failure to display a familiar story to the audience. People always relate to things that they already know, so in order to connect to the audience, you need to be on some common ground with them. The filmmakers I just listed never really consider the prospect of the audience's comprehension and attachment to their films. This isn't to say we should play to what the audience wants. Let me explain. These films did not display any kind of reality to the audience. People typically connect to a story, and at the very least, a series of recognizable images they have seen before. This is why experimentation can be difficult for artists, because you have to figure out how to change the medium you're in, all while staying within the boundaries that the audience can relate to. Why do we want to relate to the audience, though? Well, this, to me, is why we make art: to connect with other people, to tell a story that people can enjoy and learn something from the experience they had with the artwork. Our goal is to inspire and motivate the audience to improve themselves in the world they live in, so understanding what the audience wants on a very basic level is crucial as an artist to succeed. To explore the theory of structuralism more, they only focus on exploring small, minor components of filmmaking. Whereas it's our opinion we utilize all the components of filmmaking to tell a story that can generate a lot of interest within an audience. They were able to separate from theater and literature, but they failed to create a story that people could relate to. The most popular filmmakers in this movement, Brakhage and Mekas, were popular because of their style of filmmaking. People enjoyed how they used films and were attracted to their perspective rather than the stories they told. This is because of the intelligence of the audience, as they were interested in what these filmmakers were doing and enjoyed figuring out the meaning of these films. However, apply these films to a general audience, and people wouldn't be so attracted to them. This is because filmmakers didn't really capture reality as well as portray a familiar story to the audience. Jonas Mekas was one of the closest of them to do this, but his stories weren't structured enough. They were more like playful expressions than grandiose stories. So all this to say, the structuralists didn't achieve success on a bigger scale because they didn't capture reality and reconstruct it to tell a new story that the audience couldn't relate to. However, they did separate from theater and literature, and this is an accomplishment worth noting. We need to build off of what filmmakers have done before us, and in our opinion, a film theory is necessary to structure your perspective on the issue of progressing film forward. So what is the future of filmmaking? We believe the future is in the separation of theater and literature, but why? To us, films don't need to exist with actors, sets, costumes, and so on. They are necessary pieces that don't fit into what film is naturally. Films only need two things to exist, and that is the series of images and a way to edit them together. We recognize that the use of the image and the edit is all that is necessary for films, and the relationship between these two components is what should be explored and expanded upon. Theater is just a way of using film's components in order to tell a theatrical story, but it's my argument that we aren't supposed to be making theatrical stories with film. You can do this if you'd like to, but it's our theory that you aren't progressing film forward, rather you are continuing its stagnation. Our theory has the potential to seriously change how films are made and seen, as we are advocating for films that don't have theatrical and literary elements. Rather, we want films that capture reality and reconstruct it to create a new vision for the audience to experience. This vision must have a visual narrative, but unlike theatrical films, it does not rely on characters and settings. Rather, it relies on the patterns and the visual conflict built between the images and how they are presented through the use of the edit. We covered these filmmakers in this video to display how important experimentation is. We found that these filmmakers were able to make films without theatrical and literary elements. However, we found that a visual narrative is crucial to relating to the audience in order to communicate your message on a broad scale. They were able to expand the medium by making experimental artworks that explored the smaller components of filmmaking. To this, we applaud them. However, the filmmakers we look up to tackled larger stories. The Russian filmmakers Dziga Vertov and Sergei Eisenstein are two filmmakers we model ourselves after. With Eisenstein's montage theory, combined with Vertov's theory of separating from theater and literature, we have found the baseline of our revolutionary theory. We can't forget Lev Kuleshov as well, who established the important rule of how the edit dictates the emotions and perspective of the audience. We are looking to build this revolutionary theory and expand it to a wide audience who is interested in learning and growing with us. If this video has sparked some interest in revolutionary film theory, watch some of our videos and join the community.